The enemies of Jesus were struggling with a plan to kill him. Then an insider, one of the 12, stepped forward and offered up Jesus on a platter. We're examining Mark 14:10-11. Let's read verse 10 from the ESV. Then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him to them. Mark's last reference to Judas Iscariot was in chapter 3, verse 19, where we were told that he was chosen by Jesus as one of the 12 apostles. Look at how he was described in chapter 3. And Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Notice that betrayed him is in the past tense. It is a post-fact editorial comment by Mark. It was a historical fact when Mark wrote his gospel that Judas, one of the 12 hand-picked apostles, had betrayed Jesus. So now in chapter 14, Mark is showing us the details of the betrayal he referenced in chapter 3. Judas was never a standout. His name hasn't been mentioned by Mark in the last 10 chapters. Nevertheless, he was one of Jesus' apostles. Back to verse 10, he went to the chief priests. The word translated went can also mean departed. Some interpreters have argued that this signals an emotional and philosophical separation of Judas from Jesus and the other apostles. While that's possible, it can also be as simple as it sounds. He left one place in order to walk to another place. Where did he go? To the chief priests. So what? Why does that matter? Because in Mark 14:1, we were told that the chief priests are engaged in a plot to kill Jesus. Judas left Jesus' side and went to the men who were plotting Jesus' death. The last part of verse 10 is what is known as a purpose clause and answers the question, why did Judas go to the chief priests in order to betray Jesus to them? Mark seems to have a clear sense of purpose, but is largely silent on motive. We have a lot to think about. Why on earth would Judas do this to Jesus? I'll propose 4 possible motives. First, satanic influence. The devil made him do it. Both Luke's and John's Gospels explicitly say that Judas was under satanic influence or control, but Mark makes no such statement, or even such an implication. A reader of Mark would have to import that motive from outside of Mark's Gospel. Second, financial greed. He did it for the money. When we read verse 11, we'll see that the chief priests promised to give Judas money for handing over Jesus to them. There is evidence of financial gain in the text, but while Mark tells us they promised to give Judas money, he does not record Judas asking for any money. Third, disillusionment with Jesus. This is not the kind of Messiah I signed up for. With all of Jesus' recent talk about suffering, betrayal, death, and destruction, Judas may be deciding that Jesus is not going to rally the people, kick out the Romans, and institute liberation from oppression and a new glorious kingdom. Maybe Judas has decided he didn't follow Jesus to experience suffering and death. No glory. No deal. And finally, Judas as a facilitator. Let me help Jesus get what he obviously wants. Judas has heard Jesus predict betrayal and death multiple times, most notably in Mark 9:31 and 10:33. And in the immediate context in chapter 14, when the woman anointed his head with the rich perfume, Jesus said she was preparing his body for burial in advance, which was another acknowledgement that he is headed for the grave. Jesus' own language and actions showed that his journey to Jerusalem, his triumphal entry as the Messiah, his conflicts with the temple leadership in words and in casting out the buyers and sellers was leading toward a confrontation and a crisis. In Mark's Gospel, the disciples of Jesus regularly misunderstand what he is saying and doing. It is not a huge stretch to think that Judas believes he's facilitating the showdown between Jesus and the chief priests that Jesus has predicted. Is it possible that Judas thinks he's helping Jesus get where he wants to go? Is it possible that Judas doesn't believe that Jesus, the miracle worker, who calms storms, walks on water, raises the dead, ultimately won't let himself be harmed, and will seize the opportunity to assert himself as the Messiah? Perhaps, but Mark doesn't tell us one way or another. What do you think motivated Judas to betray his master to those who wanted him dead? Let me know in the comments. Let's move on to verse 11. And when they heard it, they were glad and promised to give him money. and he sought an opportunity to betray him. Literally, the verse begins, "And after they heard, they rejoiced." Why did they rejoice? Verses 1 and 2 told us that they were seeking a deceitful way to seize him, but they feared the reaction of the common people. Now Judas, one of his own followers, comes with an offer to hand him over to them. Of course, they rejoiced. They promised him money, and Judas was seeking an opportunity, a good time, a place, and an occasion to hand him over. It's not an accident that Mark uses the same word, seeking, to describe the chief priests and scribes plotting to kill Jesus, and Judas's search for the opportune moment to hand him over. They are effectively birds of a feather, or fellow seekers. This is a tough passage. What lesson can we take away from it? Humans are complex creatures, given to passions and misunderstandings. In the absence of explicit statements of motive, it's difficult to understand why people do what they do. In many instances, we may never truly or completely know why someone did what they did. But we can always strive to be clear and honest about our own motives. Next time, the preparation for Jesus' last Passover meal. Thanks for studying with me. Please share a link to this video with someone today.